There was nothing but the hand on her head, and the pain lying in wait for her.
You have to do something. Zach Owens had heard variations of that same demand ever since he moved back to Clear Springs and took a job as a deputy 9 years ago. Now, as sheriff, he heard them a whole hell of a lot more often. This one was different. He sat forward and pinned both Robert and Julie Smith with a look. You know I've been doing everything I can. For 3 days he'd been working his ass off to figure out where the hell their daughter had wandered off to. They didn't get missing persons a whole lot around here. If someone went missing, it was because they didn't want to be found. He still wasn't convinced Nevaeh Smith wasn't in that category. This isn't like the other times. Tears welled in Julie's eyes. It's that Martha Collins. She got her hooks into my girl, and she's lured her out to that damned cesspool of sin. Julie, language! Zach sighed. It was just like Robert Smith to call his wife out on her language when their daughter might or might not be missing. The Smiths were good people. They made a point to get to church every Sunday and do all sorts of community outreach, even if they were a little zealous about some of that shit. Julie Smith had made it her personal mission to see the cult up on that hill brought down in flames. But it wasn't Zach's job to tell her that Martha Collins was too smart to start snatching teenagers off the street. The folks up at Elysia aren't responsible for everything that goes sideways in Clear Springs. In all the time he'd been back in town, he couldn't remember a single thing they'd done that would shine the light of the law on themselves. Groups like that didn't make it far if they weren't able to keep their noses clean. Maybe not before. This is different. She kept saying that. Zach knew her well enough to know she wasn't going to let this go. The woman might be sweet as pie, but she was like a terrier with a bone when she got her back up. Having her only daughter up and disappear was more than enough to do that. The problem was that Nevaeh was a little troublemaker. She liked to worry her parents, and she loved getting herself into questionable situations. It would be just like her to disappear for a few days and then waltz back into town with a shit-eating grin and some boy in tow. Robert wrapped an arm around his wife's thin shoulders and gave Zach a significant look. I'm sure she'll show up before too long, but could you go talk to those freaks? It'll make Julie feel better. The very last thing he wanted to do was go out to that commune and sniff around. He wouldn't find anything they didn't want him to find, which made the whole endeavor pointless. Martha and her people would smile and chat him up, and he'd walk away empty-handed. I can do that, but you know as well as I do that they aren't likely to give me anything useful. He showed the Smiths out, making more promises to go out to the commune that very morning, if it'd make them feel better. He'd do what he had to do. Trouble? He glanced over at Henry. The man had been working at the Clear Springs station since Zach was a teenager, but when the sheriff position opened up, old Henry wanted nothing to do with it. He liked being a senior deputy, and he wasn't interested in adding more responsibility to his plate with retirement only a few short years away. Zach turned to face the west. He couldn't see Elysia from here, but he could pinpoint its exact location. Some days it felt like that damn cult cast a shadow long enough to encompass the entire town. He rubbed the back of his neck. The Smith girl might be missing. I'll bet she is. Probably missing right up to Augusta, or even over to Great Falls. The girl gets around. He shot Henry a look. It didn't matter what either of them thought of Nevaeh Smith. What mattered was giving her parents some peace of mind until she found her way back into town. They think Martha Collins had something to do with it. That Julie Smith, Henry snorted. The Winchesters had a whole batch of bread turn up unexpectedly stale last week, and who do you think Julie thought was the cause? Martha Collins. How she thought the woman managed that is beyond me. But Julie ain't exactly a neutral party, you know? I know. Hadn't he been thinking the same thing? We still have to check it out. By all means.